When I was a kid in the mid-80s, I adored things like Not the 9 O'Clock News and Alas, Smith and Jones, the latter series coming from two alumni of the former series in the form of Mel Smith and Griff Rhys Jones. It was a rich time for UK comedy, and even down here in Australia, video stores would have posters of all sorts of small, non-Hollywood movies being made over there. The poster for Morons from Outer Space, also featuring Smith and Rhys Jones, remains etched in my mind at a local video store, as does their later film, Wilt. What's interesting, however, is I never actually saw Wilt, or as our American cousins may know it, The Misadventures of Mr. Wilt. And to this day, I couldn't tell you why I never saw it. I certainly knew the film existed. I adored the leads. I do recall the poster in the shop had an inflatable doll on it, but by the time I was 16 or so, I don't think that would have stopped me renting it and taking it home. So how or why I managed to not see Wilt eludes me, but as I was watching a Not the 9 O'Clock News documentary on YouTube recently, I suddenly remembered the film and decided to rectify the situation on the spot. I grabbed my phone and ordered a copy on eBay while the doco played on. Wilt is based on a novel by the satirical writer Tom Sharpe and adapted for film by Andrew Marshall and David Renwick, the latter of whom may be known to fans of shows like Jonathan Creek and One Foot in the Grave. The basic premise is a community college lecturer is suspected of murdering his wife. He's pursued by a local detective who's sure he committed the crime, and as the audience, we really don't know any better ourselves. All of this is done, of course, in a highly comedic way. Mel Smith, who is one of my favourite British comedians of the era, if not of all time, is wonderful as Inspector Flint. Even within the relative confines of a small budget 1980s comedy, he just shines. I love him in this, and I miss him in general. Rhys Jones is equally impressive, as you might expect, as Wilt. He takes on more of a straight man role, although is clearly a little unhinged via his work at the college and his wife's behaviour in general. This actually adds nicely, of course, to the did he or didn't he vibe of the film. Has he actually lost his marbles? Interestingly, the original concept for the film was for Rhys Jones to be the detective and for Smith to be Wilt. And I can see how that could work too. I think there's a strong argument you could make for the film either way, and it would still be good. Certainly very different to each other, but yeah, both versions would be good. Now, all of this said, initially I have to confess that I found it hard to get into the film. For the first 5 minutes or so, I was sort of floundering as I tried to work out what was going on and whether all the initial introductions of the characters was giving me important information or whether it was just some background noise before something actually happened. As time ticked on, it all started to fall into place, however, and I think if I went back and rewatched it now, I would be in the right frame of mind from the start and actually get more out of the opening scenes than I originally did. I also think there's a definite 80s vibe to the script, the direction, and even the acting, which your brain kind of has to recalibrate for, especially if you've just been watching TV or a film made recently, like I'd been doing at the time. Jojo Rabbit, if you're interested, which I reviewed a few weeks ago. Because today's film and TV is just so different. So I guess it begs the question here in 2022, why should you watch Wilt? Well, I think like many of the 1980s episodes of the comic strip, it would have to primarily be because you like the leads. I think if you like who's in it, and you understand it's a budget 80s film, and it's not going to be like anything airing on TV tonight, you'll be in the right mindset to be into it. If you're going in cold to the leads, to the vibe of the acting and all of that stuff, I think you could maybe even switch off in 10 minutes. Or perhaps not. Some foreknowledge though would help most people, I think, as this isn't your average sort of movie these days. Anyway, have you seen Wilt? Do you like Mel Smith? Do you like Griff Rhys Jones? Do you remember 80s British comedy fondly like I do? Do you remember going to video stores in the 80s and seeing the same posters in there year after year after year? So many questions. I'd love to hear your answers down below in the comments.